Welcome to the Aiming Five Hole Hockey Podcast. Pure fun hockey talk from our couch to your living room. I'm Phil. That's Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Phil. I'm having a fantastic day, a first day of the season for the Montreal Canadiens. A big win over their bitter rivals, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Hey, it was a great game. And look at,
Clearly, the Canadiens are going 82-0, and the Leafs are looking at the lottery.
wow,
I'm sorry to
wow.
tell.
That's pretty bold after one win, 1-0 win. No, your boys did look pretty good tonight, especially Montembeault looked good in net. And we've purposely stopped and held off doing episode 2 because the Leafs and Habs kicked off their season tonight. And remind people, I'm from Toronto originally, living on the East Coast in the US. I'm a Toronto fan. Ryan's living on the West Coast, originally from Montreal and a Habs fan. And we're going to talk a little bit of Leafs and Habs. So
I gotta rub it in while I have the chance. That's all I can say.
hey, it was you know what? It was a real high energy game. I thought the Leafs showed a little bit about how they're going to play under Berube. They were doing a lot more down low, winning puck battles along the board, something they didn't do really well last year. Yeah, I'm excited about how they looked overall. Would have liked to seen them find their scoring touch early, but that's a little bit. We talked about this during the week as the preseason was ending about what it means and how much you should play during the preseason, and will that get you ready for the season? I
Yep.
know you got some thoughts.
Well, well, the first thing I want to notice is what I want to mention is that Cole Caulfield, wearing number 13, Johnny Gaudreau's number, for the first time scores a power play goal
Great
from the
tribute.
place he's supposed to be scoring them. So, what amazing tribute that was. Fantastic to see. Also, really weird to see number 67, Max Pacioretty, in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform at the Bell Center.
Were you
But they
surprised the
treated him
fans?
okay.
Were you
Just a,
surprised that they were booing him? I was a little surprised. Now he's
I
at
was a
least
little surprised too.
if he probably came back as a different player, he probably wouldn't have booed him. It was the Leafs, right? It was the Leafs.
It's got to be, yeah. Believe me, if he would have come back as a Bruin, they probably would have showered the ice with God knows what. But it was good to see him out there at skating, getting a chance to play. I'll be a Patches fan until he hangs him up, and probably a little bit beyond that. But it
Yeah.
was a very exciting first period, really fast. It was things bogged down a little bit for the Canadiens after that. The defensive youth reared its head, and had some problems getting the puck out of the zone, made a
Leighton
bunch of
Hudson looked good
mistakes.
though.
He's shifty, isn't he?
He looked
Man,
good. Like a few times I went,
changes
he's a
speeds.
defenseman. He's
Yeah, he's a little guy, but man,
yeah,
he's good with the puck, real shifty.
yeah.
So yeah, 82-0. Here we go.
Let's
Feeling
not
really
get ahead of
good.
ourselves. Let's not get ahead of
Yeah,
ourselves.
no, but I thought the game was interesting in that it looked cleaner than I expected for a first game of the year, especially uh, between these two teams. Um, the preseason is, we should talk about this a little bit. The preseason is kind of a joke. It's not really a prep session for the regular
Yeah.
season, and I think you and I have talked about this before. It seems a lot of times that the hockey through the month of October is not great.
Right, and I think
Um,
that's a little bit because the players aren't playing a lot. The regulars aren't playing a lot. This is really
yeah,
the preseason is meant to be a showcase or an opportunity for the young players or the guys on the bubble to get some play, to get in there and fun and showcase what they can do. And then as the season starts, as you noted, it starts off a little slow because of that, unfortunately.
yeah,
And that's the question mark. Do you have regular season? Do you not? Do you shorten it? Do you lengthen it? What do you do with it? Do you let the regulars play not regular? Like the big storyline from the preseason this year was the amount of injuries. Obviously, the Habs taking
yeah,
two big ones, and that's part of that's because the regulars that know they're in there are playing a little loosey goosey, probably not paying as much of attention, and you got some young guns out there trying to prove a point, and sometimes bad things happen, not purposely. It wasn't on purpose, but bad things happen because of that. So, what do you do in that situation?
yeah. And I would say that for the most part, it's not on purpose, but there's also a lot of, chippy stuff happening during the preseason because the stakes aren't the same.
Right.
You don't worry so much about taking a 5 minute major and giving up a couple of goals on the ensuing power play because the game doesn't matter.
Right. So what's the
And
solution?
Okay, I've been thinking about this. I think the solution is just an idea. Take issue with it if you like.
We'll take
I
it right
don't
to
think,
Bettman. We'll take it right to
yeah,
Bettman.
I don't think Bettman or Daly will be taking my phone calls anytime soon. But I think that if you get a major penalty in the preseason, it's an automatic 1 game suspension in the regular season,
Yeah, I like that.
and obviously it's not going to affect guys who are probably going to the AHL or back to Europe as much. But perhaps we could come up with some other solution, a fine system or something like that for those types of players. Something to give people incentive to not take liberties in games that don't matter.
Right. It's got to be something significant. I like that for regular NHLers that there's some kind of penalty and it carries over to the regular season. But as you pointed out, those guys on the bubble who don't end up making it go back to the minors, go back to Europe, do whatever. What is the penalty for them? Is it a fine, a heavy fine that's actually going to hurt them pocketbook? You got to deter them somehow in order
Yeah,
to not allow that kind of stuff to happen because there was a lot of bad injuries this year in the preseason,
yeah,
and that's where this conversation sort of happens of what do you do with the preseason? And it's always been a question mark in the NFL, the same thing. Does it mean what do you do? Do you cut it down? How do you protect the players? But I take the sort of end of it is it is important to have the players play in the preseason, get some rhythm, get used to each other again after being away for the summer, because a hot start in the regular season does mean something, unfortunately, or fortunately.
yeah.
And you need to get off to that quick start. And so it sets your season up for success. Because if you start slow, then you're battling back, but if you start the season well on a good stride, that sets your season up for potential success. Not always, but potential success.
Right, which is interesting because if the hot start is important, and it is, and we'll talk about that more in a sec, then why aren't regulars being played together in their normal line combinations, um, and getting normal power play time throughout the preseason?
I agree with
Granted,
you
they're
100%.
granted they're if other teams aren't doing that, then it's hard to get into the right rhythm. But a hot start is important, and so obviously we want to see the younger players play and see what they can do and get a sense. But man, it seems to me that you want to get your team off playing October hockey for as little time as possible
Yeah,
because you can't afford to. And if it gives you an advantage over other teams that aren't doing it, by all means, just
absolutely.
have at it.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to talk about the reason for this in a second, but I think even it's more important to use your regulars in the regular season is a team like the Leafs or other teams that have new coach. You want them to play the style that they're going to want to play and get used to it in the preseason. So again, sets you up. I think tonight we saw the Leafs playing a different style. And I thought it was great. They're going to have to turn that into some scoring touch. They're going to get there. There's game one, so let's not worry about the scoring touch too much at this moment. But you want them to, they showcased how they're going to play down low. They're going to win some puck battles this year. They're going to get down low. But as we talked about that, right, that first 2 months of the season are so important with the oncoming November Thanksgiving theory of how important it is when it comes to playoffs.
Yeah,
And you look over I think it's the last 14 seasons since 2005, 2006, of the 171 teams that made the playoffs, of 224 teams that would make the playoffs, 171 of them were in the playoff position at Thanksgiving. That's 76% of the teams at Thanksgiving generally make the playoffs.
so 14 seasons. So you're saying from 2006 to 2020.
The 2020, well, no,
And
it's
I
a
think
2023, but you're taking away the
okay.
COVID years,
Oh, the
right?
two seasons.
So
Okay,
you're taking away the COVID
so
years. So
that's
that's how important,
unbelievable.
yeah, that's how
The first,
important the first 2 months of the season can be for your team. Now, there's outliers to that rule. St. Louis with Berube in 2019 were in dead last place in the fall, in November, when they fired Mike Yao. They were 7-9-3 and in last place. Actually, they were in last place in January. They went on a 11-game win streak. They finished the season 30-10-5 and went on to win the Stanley Cup playoffs, the finals.
that's
That
yeah,
is amazing.
that's the exception that proves the rule. And I
Exception to
think
the rule, but
The
Go
other
ahead.
half of the rule, well, it's not even half of the rule. It's just an interesting statistic around that is of those teams that fell out of the playoff position at Thanksgiving. So that's 23%. Almost 2/3 of those teams were only up in the playoff picture by a point.
Right.
So, by a single point, which means that if you're 4 or 5 points out of a playoff position at Thanksgiving, unless you're the miracle St. Louis Blues, you're cooked.
That would be the theory, right? And what's amazing is by November, by Thanksgiving, you've only played 25% of the season. That is amazing when it comes to what that benchmark means and how important it is to get off to that quick start. So, it's truly amazing, that stat. But
On the other hand, it may just mean that typically speaking, teams that are playing well at the beginning of the season continue to play well through the season, and
sure,
vice versa.
the cream
Um,
rises to the top, right?
yeah, yeah,
But there is
and
so much parity in the league right now, right? There's so much. Now, there's Chicago didn't play very well last year. San Jose was terrible. Columbus was terrible. Anaheim. So you have those teams, but the rest of the there's parity. Look how close that East division was in terms of how close everybody was to making the playoffs there at the end. Look at uh, who was it?
the
Um,
Red Wings missed by a point on the last day of the
Yeah,
season.
they didn't miss by a point. They were tied. They won. They
Yeah,
lost on wins in regulation. So,
right.
it's so important to win in regulation to get off to the fast start. And then part of that is that other theory is if you're getting off to that fast start and you're playing, how important is it to continue to do that and strive for perfection throughout the year? Because there's another curse that sort of happens at the end of the year, which is the President's Trophy. How important is it to win the President's Trophy? And I'll tell you how important it isn't to win that trophy. Since 1985-86, only 8 teams of 37 years have that won the President's Trophy have gone on to win the Stanley Cup final. It's only 22% of the teams.
All right.
8 teams have been eliminated in that time. President Cup trophy winners have been eliminated in the first round.
So as many teams have lost in the first round as have won the cup.
Yes. And the last team to do it, obviously, was the Chicago Blackhawks in 2012-13. We haven't had somebody win the President's Cup trophy and the Stanley Cup final since 2012-13 season. That is amazing.
Wow, that is
Given
pretty
some of the
amazing.
great teams, the Avalanche that won, remember they went spiraling out. Florida before they won it, that happened to them. It happened to Tampa Bay. It's happened to the Bruins. It's that is sort of, again, to me, getting off to a great start allows a team to set up their play and how they use their players throughout the whole season so that you're set up for success and playing a style of hockey that you're going to have to play in the finals, right? I think one of the things I heard during the preseasons from Jeff O'Neill, I thought was a really interesting. And again, I'm taking it back to Leafs because I'm a Leafs fan. He said, I thought was a very great statement. He said the Leafs don't need to play better; they need to play different. And I thought that was really smart comment because they're a great team. They played great last year, but when it came to the playoffs, they were playing a different style of hockey that we all know in the playoffs doesn't work. They couldn't
Right.
shift gears from the regular season to the playoffs. I think what Berube is trying to instill in them is we're going to play this, and we saw it a little bit tonight. We're going to play this hard-nosed, down low, hit you, win puck battles in the corner, cycle the puck. That's the style we're going to play. We're going to make the playoffs. We're going to get there, but we're going to be playing a style throughout the whole season that's going to make us successful in the playoffs.
But you
That's the hope.
theoretically,
That's the
you
hope. That's
but they theoretically could play that style of hockey, win the President's Trophy, and then there's got to be a different reason why they won't win the Stanley Cup.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think we got to unpack that a little bit. I feel like often the President's Cup winner, the President's Trophy winner, is in a position to put it on cruise control towards the end of the year.
Yes.
And I think probably it's impossible to just turn the Jets on again, right? Like
You've gone into cruise control mode, and then it's tough to gear it back up.
Yeah, the last 3-4 games of the season, the coach is managing ice time, making sure nobody's getting injured, letting bodies rest up. By the way, that's very important, right? You want to go into the playoffs healthy, but you also want to go into the playoffs with the right mindset. And it's become pretty clear, historically speaking, that you can't just flip a switch when it comes to the first round of the playoffs. And I think that's entirely why the Bruins, who had a historic season a couple of years ago, just got flattened in the first round.
Right. And it's probably the reason why St. Louis, in the year they in 2018-19, or what did I say what year that was? And yeah,
either 17, 18, or 18,
18, 19, where they were playing playoff style hockey from January 1, and they carried it through, right? They were having to play, but that can also burn you out, right? They were playing, and they just got on a roll and just kept going, but they were playing playoff hockey from January right through the playoffs. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier, is that it's why I think it's so important to get off to a good start. Because I think you said it, it's so hard to if you get off to this rocket ship start or get so far out ahead like the Bruins did a few years ago, you put it into cruise control. I think that happened to the Avalanche a few years ago too. And then it's hard to gear it back up. But if you're consistent throughout the whole season, play well, manage your ice time, manage your players' time throughout the whole season, keep them fresh, keep them playing a style that you want them to play from the beginning, then you're hopefully set up. The theory is you're set up for success come the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right. And you're hitting this playoffs.
As a coach, I guess you're trying to thread the needle a little bit, right? You got to play really well throughout the year. You want to be on an even keel throughout the year. But those last couple of weeks of the season, you want to slowly start ramping things up, not ramping things down.
Right.
And I think that does explain why the President's Trophy winner doesn't typically win. I also think it explains why you've got a lot of mid to lower seeded teams that get so far in the playoffs, especially big ones.
Right.
Because they're coming into the playoffs, they're playing that heavy style of hockey.
They're battling.
They're battling. And then when you get into a 7-game season again, 7-game series against one team, by game 6 or 7, the other team is just hurting. They're looking over their shoulders, going into the corners, and that's where upsets happen, and a lot of them have happened.
They're doubting themselves, right? They've gone, we were playing so great all season. What happened? They're not thinking the way we do as looking at it, sort of saying, you've took the foot off the pedal and you haven't geared it back up. It's tough. And you're right. I think that they start looking over their shoulders, start looking for reasons, and it's a coach's obligation to try and keep them playing and gearing up instead of gearing down. But again, consistency throughout the whole season. And I think that's going to be an interesting part of seeing how Berube coaches the Leafs, and is he able to do that for them? Although,
what else are you looking forward? What else are you looking forward to seeing this season?
Oh wow, I think the biggest thing is Ovi, right? Is Ovechkin going to break Gretzky's record? He's only 42 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's rule, passing the record and owning it. What are your thoughts? Do you think he's going to do it? Like,
no. Look, it's going to go one of two ways. And the way I would love to see him do it is to have like a historic OV season, go on a tear, get that one timer from the wing, going on the power play, and just pour in goals. Because the way he skates now, like a lot of his goals, percentage wise, are going to come from the power play more than they used to, right?
Right.
And so I would love to see him have a season like that and just go in, rake it through, and in a shower of glory.
Right.
What's much more likely to happen is that he'll score 20, 25 goals this year, and start looking pretty slow towards the end of it.
Right. Well, what's interesting is last year he scored 31. the previous two
Mm.
years, he scored 42. So he's right there. If he's able to match his success from the last couple of years, he's close, but I agree with you. I think he's going to fall short and he's going to do it next year. I would love to see him do it this year and have one of these miracle years. But I think they have a lot of changeover on that team this year. Seven new players coming in.
They got a lot of new players.
I'm not convinced that they've made some great lineup changes. Who's he going to play with? I don't know. I just don't think that he's going to get there. I agree. But
Yeah,
the other
but
thing is that he's also only 50 points away from 1600 of his career,
which is
another
pretty incredible
milestone. But
too.
he's
I
going to
mean,
get that one. He's going to get
he's
that one.
historic. He's a historic player for sure. First ballot Hall of Famer. The thing I worry about is that he's a year older. If he doesn't make it next year, he'll be even a year older than that. He already looks like an Ewok on ice sometimes when skating. I mean, he's just not moving around that well.
Well, it's because he stays
And
on the ice for 40 minutes a time.
but like what happens next year
5 minute
if he just
shifts.
needs if he needs 15, 16 goals next year and like, he's
Yeah.
they've got a winger out there or a center out there with him whose only job as it is to push him towards the net. So
Look, there's no way he's retiring until he makes this record. And I think
exactly.
everybody wants to see him make the record or break the record. And I
Exactly.
think he's going to do
And
it. He's been a generational player, like you said. And to and in today's NHL where it's harder to score goals, for him to have the longevity, the consistency to get him this close and get him to near the record and gonna break it is pretty amazing.
I have a prediction. I don't know when
Okay.
it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. It's just popped into my head. I predict, just because the hockey gods love to do stuff like this, he will break the record against the Penguins so that Crosby can be in the building to witness it.
Wow.
You
That
know,
would be
these
cool.
rivals for 20 plus
Yeah,
years, get to share that moment together. I think
right.
that would be great.
No, that'd be awesome. And they're both generational players, and they came into the league pretty close to each other and whatnot. So it'd be great to see. What else
Yep.
are you looking forward to this year? Obviously, congratulations on tonight, obviously. Enjoy your one win against the Leafs that you're gonna have this year. What
Well,
else are
it's
you
nice
looking
to
forward
know. Well, it's nice to know we're not going to go 0-82, but
to?
no, look, the reality will be somewhere in the middle. I am looking forward to so many things this season. I'm looking forward to um, uh, seeing McDavid hit 1,000 points at a ridiculously young age. I'm looking forward to seeing Macklin Celebrini. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Connor Bedard does in his second year. He had, a couple of assists in their first game this season
Right,
already. I'm looking forward to seeing whether or not a couple of what the hell is wrong with these type teams, um, whether they can finally, you know, go get over the hump.
right,
First off is Buffalo. Like
right.
they should be so good, and then they go to Europe and get waxed 2 nights in a row,
Yeah, that's a
and it
tough
didn't look
trip.
great doing it.
No.
Yes, it is a tough trip. I wouldn't wish that on the Canadians. I
Yeah.
think doing that is hard. Coming back, recovering from the jet lag, and then playing a team that didn't have to do that a few days later that's
Right,
rough.
right.
That's really rough.
Yeah.
And maybe in a future episode, maybe next week, we can talk 5 minutes about whether or not these international games make sense or whether they should be preseason games earlier in the preseason.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you on that side. But then it goes back to our conversation about preseasons. Do they mean anything? What group of players do they take over there? And they're trying to obviously it's a revenue driving thing and trying to drive the league interest in around the world and build their viewership across the world. Then you take the B players there and you get no interest and no revenue. So it's a tough one. This year seemed different than what last year was because this year it was just Buffalo and New Jersey that went. Last year in Sweden it was three or four teams, right? It was the Leafs.
Yeah.
It was who else was over there last year? It was the
Wasn't it
Leafs again.
Australia last year or
No,
something? I can't remember.
it was Sweden because that's why the Leafs
Oh,
were there.
Sweden.
So and it was I thought the three games were pretty good and they were high energy and stuff. So, but oh well. The one thing we didn't talk about tonight's game, and I always because we bust each other's chops about our teams. You know who was invisible to me like tonight, which is a miracle because I hate watching him.
Who?
Gallagher. Gallagher, I thought was invisible tonight, which
He's
is not a bad thing because I hate him. and he's a
Well,
pest.
first of all, he's a fourth liner now, so he's playing 11, 12 minutes a
Yeah,
night. He had a couple of opportunities um, in the third period that were sort of traditional Brendan Gallagher type things, where he's in front of the net, causing trouble and trying to get a stick on things. But again, a guy who's another year older and has some really hard miles on
right.
his wheel. So I think he's probably playing in a spot in the lineup where he
Yeah,
should be at
yeah,
this point in
yeah.
his career.
Should be left out as
But
far as I'm concerned.
well, speaking of guys who should be left out, the fact that Ryan Reeves is playing
Oh,
for the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, they could have won that game if he could have put either of the two open net
yeah. I was a little,
opportunities he had.
yeah, I was a little surprised that Bobby McCann wasn't in there. But based on the preseason, and you saw what Burby was doing, he loved that heavy line of Reeves, Lawrence, who looked good, and Camp.
Yeah,
He loved that line together. The other storyline tonight for me was here we are again. Jason Wool is injured now. Great, Stollart's proved his worth tonight. He played amazing, and he showed what he's going to be able to do as a potentially a backup, but potentially a starter. But Will again injured already. Like all of a sudden, we're here. We are. The worry that we had was can Will stay healthy for the year, and we start the year and he's already not even traveling with the team. So, and
I
tomorrow
know,
night we got New Jersey, and we got our old coach tomorrow night.
and that's doubly hard for you because Wool is a name that you can pronounce fairly comfortably, and Stolars might give you a little headache from time to time.
You're going to spend the year over these podcasts correcting my poor grammar, my poor pronunciation of players all year long.
Just names, just the names.
I'm going to have to come up with nicknames for everybody because half of these names now I can't pronounce.
I just can't wait for the next time you say Marcia Show.
I'm not even going to say it tonight. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction. I'm not going to give you the satisfaction. But it's interesting. The Leafs tonight, they played the Habs, which is obviously a great rivalry, which is awesome every year. That goes back and forth between Toronto and Montreal. Tomorrow night, we're playing our old coach in New Jersey. And then Saturday night, we're playing Pittsburgh and our old GM.
Oh, wow.
That's actually pretty genius. Whoever set up the schedule going Leafs, Jersey, Penguins for the Leafs.
That's pretty good rivalry games.
So it's going to be a fun weekend of watching hockey. I'm going to have a lot of fun watching it. You and I are probably going to go back and forth like we were tonight on texting, talking about ways. I'm actually, after we finish this podcast, I'm going to go watch McDavid and the Oilers play the Jets because that's going to be a fantastic, fun game to watch, I think.
I just want our audience to take note of the fact that you are an East Coast fan who's not afraid to tune into a West Coast game.
Well, it's also I'm sitting here in the middle of a hurricane, so standing up to make sure my house doesn't float away. But we didn't even acknowledge that at the beginning of this.
We probably should have.
Power didn't go out while this was going on because we're sitting here in the middle of Milton. Now it's pushed a little further south from us where I am here in Orlando, so it's pretty not bad. But those poor people on the West Coast are getting beaten up. I'm sorry.
Well, I now look like the biggest asshole in the world that we started this off, and the first thing out of my mouth should have been, "Hey Phil, is everything okay at your house?
Yeah. I'm doing this for my floating house in the middle of a hurricane.
We're broadcasting live from a dinghy."
Well, I think we should probably end it there. I'm gonna go home, make sure my house is still in one piece. I'm gonna go enjoy some more hockey, staying up tonight, and you're probably gonna watch a little bit of West Coast hockey because you're there, and it's still early for you. But this is fun. Episode 2. We're gonna keep doing this as long as we can this year, and I'll see you whether we do this weekend or next weekend again. That we're going to talk hockey and we're going to have fun.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Stay safe. I'm going to do my duty now. Stay safe. Take care of that family of yours.
All right.
I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Talk to you soon.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Thanks.